Hello and welcome, I'm Kier Scrivener, and today we're going to be talking about November. It's definitely going to be more of a chatty video. I'm going to talk about my plans, I'm going to talk about my ambitions, kind of some goals at the end of the year, and I'm also going to be talking about Nanowrimo, which I'm really psyched for. So if you just want my TBR, I will leave a timestamp. I will be talking about a bunch of things before I get to the books that I will be reading in depth. First thing that I really want to tackle is finishing some books. I currently have on Goodreads 38 books on my currently reading shelf, and that is not a record high, but it is not particularly great. And I know so many of the books like I'm enjoying, I'm loving them. And because I have dyslexia and ADHD, I often really struggle with I'll sit down and I'll read a chunk of a book. But like even if I dedicate like a whole day to reading it, or like I'll sit there for an afternoon, like I won't read very much. I I wish I could be a person who read a full book in a length, but like it takes me so long to read anything. A good example is I was reading Whose Body in a Hospital, and I was stuck there for I think 8 hours, and I read 70 pages. You can tell that is less than 10 pages an hour on a book that like does not have big print, does not have like substantial reasons why I should not be able to read it fast. If it's a classic, I read it even slower. So I'm definitely not a particularly quick reader. It's why I read so many audiobooks, not because I don't enjoy physically reading, but I want to immerse myself in a lot of stories, and I would only be reading like a couple books a month if I was reading physically, which I know a lot of people are very happy with, but I don't know, I like to be, I find that if I read audiobooks and allow myself to do multiple things at a time, I don't get frustrated at myself for slow progress. But I do think that like I've been taking more time in my private life to sit and relax and like turn my phone off and be in solitude and be in prayer and stuff. And I felt that it helped a lot with my mental health and just having more energy and having more like less stress in my life. So I feel like I want to implement that with books. When I did my end of the year book tag, I talked about 3 books that I wanted to finish before the end of the year. One of them is Kim Ji-yeon, 1982. This is a book that I started in January. I think I read like 32 pages. I know that I spent 2 days reading this book. So again, it's not a large book with not a lot of print, but it did take me probably like 7 hours to read 32 pages. And a lot of that was I did a lot of research. I wrote some stuff. I don't know, when I read physical books too, I like to not just read the books and read it really fast. I want to sit there, I want to annotate them, especially this book that has notations and footnotes that look at real studies and the ways in which her life relates to other Korean women and how it's banned in Korea and stuff. I want to look into that, and I want to so many lines are beautiful. The translation is also wonderful. It's by Jamie Chan, and I spend a lot of time reading and thinking about the books that I read physically. So I want to spend a day. This book is only 162 pages, which I think a lot of people could read in an afternoon. I might need a day or two to finish it, but it's a book that I've been kind of intimidated because I know I'm going to spend so much time reading it, but I want to. I'm going to set 2 days apart for it, and I'm only going to read that, and I'm going to allow myself to not be distracted. The other book is Whose Body by Dorothy L. Sayers. This is a book that is a murder mystery, kind of in Agatha Christie era, and it has Lord Peter Wimsey. It is quite fun and funny, and I'm enjoying it, and I really want to finish it. So that is my hope. I'll probably need a day, I think, because it's a little bit quicker on the read, but it is definitely a book that I'm enjoying a lot. My last one on there is Interpreter of Melodies, and this is a book that I've been reading for quite a while. I started it last September, and I spend so much time thinking about this book. It is so beautiful. I feel like every line I just read it and I'm like, I want to be an author like that. I don't know, I find books that's the books that I read physically often is when the prose is so good that I think about it so much. When I was talking about it, Monika from Dog-Eared Musings talked about doing a buddy read, and I was like, yes, so we're gonna set that up. And it's nice because it's short stories, so I feel like it's really easy to read one and then discuss it and stuff. So we'll be figuring out that schedule and stuff. So hopefully I'll have those 3 books. Also, Monika is really incredible. I love her videos. They're often quite short, but they're detailed and intelligent and introspective and nuanced, and you're also just relaxed and fun. She's a librarian. I really love her videos, so I really recommend her, and I'm really excited to have all these discussions with her about this book, because I feel like it's a book that I do really want to talk about it, and I feel if I'm reading with someone, then I won't feel as much pressure to spend 30 minutes thinking about every line. Which is just kind of the person I am. So I feel like I can be oh, these are my thoughts, I'll talk about Monika with them, rather than here's my thoughts, I'm gonna read 10 pages, or read honestly 2 pages, and then not read it for the rest of the night because I'm thinking about it. This is what happens to me. This one almost feels silly. I wanted to do it for so long, and it's called Book Hauls Revisits. I first saw this on Greg's from Supposedly Funds, and I really, really love his channel and the way that he looks at whether he's read the books, whether he hasn't, and like how that reflects on reading and stuff like that, which honestly is not probably how I would do them because I have no really desires to unhaul books. Like I do occasionally unhaul a few books, as in I've unhauled books twice in my 5 years of my channel, but I don't really have a desire. I have a lot of book collections, and even like books like, you know, The Catcher in the Rye that I hate. Like I have, you know, annotations in it and stuff, and someone else wants to read it, I'll give it to them. My roommate once couldn't get to bed, and she's like, I just need something boring. And I was like, this is the worst book ever. Like, you will read it and you will want to die, and that will put you to sleep, which is pretty much harsh. She did read like half a page and was like, yeah, I think I'm good. I'll go to sleep now. It might have just been my incessant ranting about it, but you know, I like the memories, and I didn't have a lot of access to books growing up. So it's really, really important to me to have access to books, and to like, you know, I buy all my books for thrift stores. So I tend to buy a lot, but like I don't spend a lot of money. Like I tend to buy, you know, books from, whenever I see a book that's like $3, I'm like, oh no, it's expensive. Because I don't do book hauls very often, and because I don't do wrap-ups very often, both of them I tend to like, I don't know, they feel like a lot and overwhelming and stuff like that, and I just don't. So I feel like this could be a cool way of like almost doing wrap-ups without it having to be as time sensitive. But I don't do regular book hauls, so I can't like just go back and see the videos in the list. So I need to find my old bullet journal so I can actually do them. And then NaNoWriMo. I'm a little afraid of this one. So I was inspired by Morgan. She is incredible. Also just like delightful and relaxing at the same time. And she did a series of like Preptober videos where she talked about like superhero and like the different genres and stuff, and just the creativity there, and like the ability of being like, yes, I'm inspired, and also like this is so cool. And her videos, like I know nothing, I don't care very much about like circus and juggling, but like she's done videos about that where I'm like, yes, now I want to learn about juggling, just because she's so fascinating when she talks, even when I have no interest, which I think is like the best thing, because we primarily like watch and read things because, you know, we enjoy them. But when you can like enjoy someone's content when you have no interest in the thing, like obviously I have an interest in reading, but not in like her specific areas of study, and I still find her so fascinating. So this is something that I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do NaNoWriMo. I did start like my writing life as a fiction writer. You know, I love making stories, and I have a million novels up to date. And I have one that is, you know, at about 50,000 words that I would love to finish and publish one day. But what I'm focusing on this NaNoWriMo is poetry. I primarily write poetry. I pretty much write it every single day, so I'm not so worried about like the everyday thing. But big goal is to submit my poetry by the end of November, so November 30th. This is something that my friend Ivy has also challenged me to, because I'm really, really bad. Like I've had an entire poetry collection edited, beta read for like a year. I have an entire like outline for a submission form, and like which publishing houses I wanted to submit to, and what has open submissions and stuff. And I've written all of that, and I panicked because I really struggle with rejection, and really struggle with like, am I a good poet? Like I feel like poetry is just like, it's hard to know, and I never thought I would become a poet, so like I still second guess myself so much. So it's something that I need to do by November 30th, and I'm giving myself 30 days, and I'm really, really nervous because I don't want to do it, but I do want to do it. Like I want to publish it. And you know, when I talk about poetry a lot, like people will be like, you know, have you published anywhere? I'm always like, no. So the other big thing that I want to do is submit a poem. So Therese Escon is a poet that I really, really love. She did Phantom Pains, which just blew my mind, because it talks about disability and chronic health and pain and medical gaslighting and the ways in which the medical system fails us. And she's Canadian, and she doesn't have the same disability as me, but her representation of what disability feels like, it like shook me to my core. I was like, it talks about like, she uses like fantasy elements and Visayan mythology and stuff to like talk about it, and just so much of the stuff like being like, this is so cool, I love what you're doing. Like it's kind of like what I've always seen and wanted to see manifested in the book, and she's so cool. So she's editing a poetry review in May, and there's open submissions for disabled poets, and I would love to do it. I have a lot of poems talking about disability and talking about pain and stuff like that, which I, you know, I always feel like I invalidate myself. I have a neuromuscular disability, but you know, a lot of medical gaslighting and the ways that people don't think that I qualify as disabled in personal life and stuff like that. Like I've really, really struggled. How much like it has bedridden me, how much it has like kept me from working and school and that, and yet people look at me because I'm not in a wheelchair, and they think that like I don't have a disability. Or when I do use a wheelchair, or I do use a cane, which I still use a fair bit in my life, a lot of people are like, why do you have a cane? You know, when are you going to be better? And I was like, like this isn't something that's going to get better. I have an incurable disease. So it's something that I think the divide between what is able-bodied and disabled is very blurry, and disability does not always look what it is. And it's something that I still invalidate myself about a lot. And I would love to just submit, like I don't care if I get in, but I would love to submit, and I have a lot of poetry about being disabled and stuff, and chronic health, and just the ways that you go through grief and stuff like that. So I really want to do that. Those are the things that I'm holding myself accountable to, even though I'm really, really afraid. The other thing booktube related that I haven't been doing for a really long time is I feel like I'm an amateur historian of writers and their lives. I really love researching. I have a lot of desire to talk about writers, but because I don't have an English degree, I don't have a history degree, like I'm not actually educated in that, I often shy away from doing things like that. And Lucy Maud Montgomery is my favorite author. I have loved her since I was a child. She is a huge inspiration to me, and I've known a lot about her personal life. Her birthday is November 30th, so the last day of November, so that's great. And I kind of want to talk about some of the things, like I wanted to do like a full deep dive into her story. I don't think that I'm going to do that this November, but I do want to talk about like her writing and the ways in which people perceived her. And there's some quotes and stuff that I won't spoil, but I think it would be a really interesting thing to look at her and the ways in which people represented her as a single woman writing in the early 1900s in Canada, and the ways in which that happened. She has a very interesting story about mental health and the way that her marriage and things like that ended up, and it's so interesting. I wanted to do it for either a mental health day or for her birthday for probably like 3 or 4 years at this point, and I just keep on not doing it. So I'm putting in my calendar, I already have like a filming day, like I have to film it by like the 15th of November or something, and I have the research, I just need to put it together. So that's something that I'm afraid to do, but I'm going to do. Now we're finally to the TBR section. I have also decided that I'm going to adapt this slightly. I often just, do the throw it at the wall kind of thing, because I do tend to read a lot of books and I tend to be a mood reader. So there's a lot of times where like I will put a lot of books on my TBR and I never get to them. Like, there are always books that I want to read. I don't necessarily read them by the end of the month, especially since I've noticed that I'm like often a little bit off-centered. Like, I was a little bit off-centered at the beginning of October, and now I'm a little bit off-centered where like I need to finish some Victober stuff. So I might not actually begin reading Indigenous authors or nonfiction for the first week of November, but then I might read beginning of like December a fair bit. So I feel like I'm often like a little bit off. But alas, I'm only going to do 5 books per. So I'm going to do 5 Indigenous books because it is Indigenous Heritage Month in the US. Actually, it's called Native American Heritage Month. So I actually really, really love this, because obviously we should read Indigenous books like all year round. But because Indigenous Heritage Month in Canada is in June and Native American Month in the United States is in November, we end up having 2 months where I'm like, I'm going to just read lots of Indigenous books. And then, I will read around the other times of year as well. So I'm really, really excited that I get the double exposure. I'm going to begin with actually the first book that was on my list last year. And I did read it, and I did not finish it because, again, I'm good at halting halfway through. But this is Dana by Norma Dunning. She's an Inuit author and she writes very, very interesting stories. I've begun them and I actually don't know because I've only read one of them, but she has a bunch of short stories and she has just a fascinating writing style and I really can't wait. So I'm gonna finish this on audiobook. The next one on here is Fevered Star by Rebecca Ronenhorst. This is a sequel to Black Sun, and it has been on my list every month, and I've been like, I love Black Sun. It was a 5-star for me, and I feel like every month since it's come off, I've like had it come out from the library and I'm like nervous to read it, because when you love a book so much and you're nervous about doing it. So I feel like I can't delay it anymore. I have to read it, and I'm super, super excited. She's a Black and Indigenous author who writes a lot of beautiful, beautiful stories, and I'm really, really excited. I also have Echo potentially by her. And then we have Our Voice of Fire by Brandy Morin. She is Canadian and she is Cree and French, and she writes from the perspective of being an Indigenous woman who was abducted and who was missing. And she is a journalist who covers a lot of the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And I'm really, really excited. I'm kind of nervous because it seems like it's going to be really, really heavy, but I'm really excited to read it. The next book is On Vacation by Thomas King, and he is Cherokee, and he's also Canadian. He lives kind of right near me, and I'm always excited. I'm nervous that I'm going to drop things on my head before, because I have things on top of my bookshelf, because when do we ever have just things on our bookshelves? I read 2 books for him last year, and they were so incredible, so I'm super, super excited to read this. So this is about Mimi and Bird. They are Indigenous and go on vacation in Europe, and they are tracing like these old postcards from like 30 years ago from a long-lost uncle Leroy, and I don't know if they're gonna find him, they're gonna find things, I don't know. But his writing is very, very humorous when also being very nuanced. Like he can cut you to the core. He can talk about things. Inconvenient Indian, one of the best books I've ever read. Like it is so good at like, dealing so well with humor and dealing so well with like nonfiction and never, ever, ever shying away from the truth when also making it very entertaining and like so good. Such a good book. So I'm super excited to read this, and I kind of want to read like everything that he ever reads. The last book on here is One Native Life by Richard Wegemies. I'm really excited to hear about this because I've heard it's super, super good. It is a memoir that just looks at one life, and it's talking about how like, often Indigenous people or people of color in general get put in like these large overarching life. I've heard it described as like him being like, this is my one life, this is my one story. Like it's not an overarching narrative about all Indigenous people. It's just my story. And I love memoirs. They're some of my favorite things in the world. So I'm super excited for this one, and I've heard great things. I've wanted to read several of his books, and this seems like a great place to start. So, which is a perfect transition into Nonfiction November. I'm really, really excited. I love nonfiction, especially memoirs. Memoirs are my favorite. So I'm going to be talking about some memoirs. I'm going to be talking some other books. And let's begin with Cleopatra, which is another book that has been on my currently reading for 2.5 years now. I have read, I think, 70 pages of this, and again, adored it, loved it, underlined, discussed it, failed a buddy read with Cara, who is amazing and wonderful, and you should check her channel out. Again, so intelligent, so intelligent. So I have found such a fascination with Cleopatra in this book, and again, distracted by rabbit holes of research. So this is a book that I hope to read, at least get another chunk of it done. And I'm super, super excited. The next book that I want to talk about is The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. James Baldwin is an incredible author that I have loved everything that I've read by him, and this is first nonfiction. So this is 2 letters that he wrote on the 100th year anniversary of emancipation of enslaved people. Apparently it was very, very groundbreaking in the civil rights movement, so I'm really excited to read another book by him. Because I love memoir so much, we have On Being Ill by Virginia Woolf, which again is a book that I have been reading since summer. I have, as I discussed earlier, I have a disability and I dealt a lot with being ill. So I found this really, really fascinating and looking at that. And I'm really excited. This was a short essay. Like I think it's literally maybe only 50 pages to begin with. And I read 10 pages and wrote my own essay and like reflected on it and never finished. This is a book that I really am excited to read. I like Virginia Woolf as an author and I'm excited to continue. I feel like I'm just going to be constantly referring back in this video, but earlier I kind of talked about taking more quiet time and reflecting. And I've been doing that with Spiritual Direction by Henry Nouwen. He was a priest and a psychologist. I'm more Protestant than Catholic, but I think that his work is still really, really interesting. And he talks a lot about being reflective and on thinking and allowing space. Like I really loved it. He just had a section that I read about being like how writing kind of invites God in and allows your time to like really take time to not only, deal in silence and solitude, but also to think and to create and creativity. And I really, really loved that. And yeah, I've just been taking time reading his book every day. This is a book that I started in 2019 and I am realizing my shame so much right now, but it is one that I'm just quietly reading. I often don't talk about like the Christian nonfiction and other stuff that I read, but I definitely do read it. So this is a book that I am excited to finish as well. And I think I will reading like a little section each day. So that has been my mornings. And then last and certainly not least on this list, we have Coloration by Will Haygood. And this is a book that is very, very long. So I don't know if I'm going to read. I really hope I'm going to read it, but it is 18 hours long, which is a mammoth of a nonfiction book. But this is kind of looking at Hollywood, and it looks at 100 years of Black films in white Hollywood. I'm really not sure how degree of like actually colorization and like black and white to color means, or how much it is a play on words of like colorization and the ways in which like all the social aspects of color and the ways in which race and racialization happens. So I have no idea what this is actually about. But I'm really, really fascinated. I'm not like a, movie buff or anything like that, but I do find Hollywood and things like that interesting remotely. So I'm intrigued by this book. It has been on my list, I think, probably for about a year. So I would really, really love to get to it. And because this video is not long enough already, I'm going to add 3 more books that I'm super excited for and I hope to read as well that don't fit into any of those categories. So the first one is Our Lady of Fortune by Chloe Gahn. This is kind of a continuation of her Violent Delights books, which are incredible. They are retellings of Romeo and Juliet. And this one also looks at Shakespeare, and she is like 22, 23, and just incredible and writing such fascinating, beautiful prose and romance. It is YA and I love that. So I'm super, super excited. I feel like November is always my height of fantasy. So I also want to read Babel by Rebecca Kwan because I have been wanting to read her and the Poppy War for years. It's just one of those books that has never made it off my TBR despite being like at the tip of it always. So this is a book that I think is especially going to be interesting. I'm also really, really excited for Yellowface next year. It's like, I follow her on Instagram, like I follow her in all things, and I'm like super excited for her, despite not reading any of her books. So hopefully this will change. But pretty much my understanding from people talking about it and prompts and stuff like that, that it's set in Oxford and it has a Chinese exchange student and he is dealing with kind of academics, and he kind of hoped that like academia would be like a haven for him. He's translating and stuff like that and looking at these things, and he's hoping that. And instead, there's so much colonialism and so much things in erasure, and the ways in which I think they want him to translate things to like further racist ideas and stuff. So I've heard that there's definitely some dark academia there. You know, there's a lot of conversation on race and colonialism, and I think this is going to be a book that's like so good. And then last but certainly not least, we have All's Well by Mona Awad. And I'm super, super excited. I have been excited since it was released. And then Monika, who I mentioned earlier, talked about it, and her review, I will link it below, was just great. And I was like, okay, I definitely will read it. The main character has chronic illness as well, so super, super excited for that. And she's putting on a Shakespearean adaptation of All's Well That Ends Well. It's a play that I've seen twice in the last 4 months at Stratford, and I love. It is definitely not one of the popular ones, but that adaptation is so great. When they record it, like I really hope that everyone goes and sees it, because it is such a good adaptation, and I really, really love it. So I'm really interested to see it, because when I originally read it in like print, I did not like it at all. So I'm really interested to see this, and obviously it's a play on like all's well, like, you know, being ill, not being ill, and I think that like she's kind of controlling and she's trying to relive through things, and like, you know, she's dealing with chronic illness and she should probably take rest, but she's trying to push through. I'm really, really fascinated where this goes with someone who loves like Shakespeare. Literally, I guess all of these books that I'm talking about are kind of talking about Shakespeare and Oxford and like literature. You know, maybe that's something that I love. I'm really, really excited to read these books and to enjoy them. And yeah, let me know which book I should highlight the most. I'm really excited for all of them. And tell me something daring you plan to do in November. And I'll see you next time.